On this episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast, we talk about Sunbather by Deafheaven.
We're back and ready to attack.
That was okay.
Dang it.
Let's cue the music. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Lore. I'm Aaron Mankey.
And I'm somebody else on Lore.
Aaron Mankey's the only guy on Lore. No, welcome to the Bronze Medalist podcast. My name is Kayle, and I am your guide through this spiritual journey of metal, and with me is my spirit animal.
Yes, my name is Jaryn, and I am your lost wanderer looking for someone to lead me into the promised land.
Interesting. So I called you my spirit animal.
Oh.
If you were an animal, what do you think? So what's your spirit animal so you can be mine?
I don't know, like, for sure. Do you pick your spirit animal, or is that something that's given to you?
I mean, you pick your spirit animal based on aspects of your personality, I think.
I'd say a barn owl. I just
You're
think
a barn
owls
owl?
are cool.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I think I'd probably be like a bear. Not because I'm super strong, but because I'm lazy and like to eat a lot. So I think.
But when push comes to shove, you'll rip somebody's face off.
Nah, I think I'm not even like a grizzly bear or a polar bear. I'm more like a sun bear or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a peaceful, kind of dopey looking bear. Not even a panda. I'm not cute enough to be a panda. Anyway, if you haven't figured it out already, Bronze Metalist is a podcast where we talk about a metal album that we listened to this week and tell you what we thought of it. I haven't really explained the purpose of this podcast in a while, so I guess now's the time. I'm more well-versed in metal. I've been a fan of metal and hardcore and whatnot for a while. And Jaryn is not. You're a newcomer.
I don't even think I'd listened to kind of the mainstream metal. Like, I hadn't heard that much of, like, Metallica or anything like that really before. And so this has been fun to take a dive into.
I want to move your mic a little bit closer to you.
But yeah, I hadn't really listened to a whole lot of stuff before this podcast. And so it's fun to take a dive into not mainstream stuff. Like, Stuff that I didn't know about, but now like Dream Theater. That's just like, whoosh, I can't imagine. Yeah, like how does everybody not know about this?
Yeah, that's a sentiment I've been dealing with for quite a while. So on today's podcast, we're going to be talking about a interesting album from a band called Deafheaven. But before we get to that, I guess we'll have some more banter, because why not? Jaryn, you turned 21 yesterday.
21, the big 20 fun, one might say.
I guess. That works.
Yeah, it was
20 fun.
20 fun, yeah. It was a pretty low-key day. It was Valentine's Day. I was born on, Valentine's Day, so everybody was in love, which stinks because my girlfriend lives 4 hours away.
Yeah, that's not great.
Closest,
I mean, you got to see her last weekend, though.
That's true, and I get to see her this weekend.
Oh.
But yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Went to class, went to church. It was Ash Wednesday.
There you go.
Went out and bought a bottle of Crown Royal because that's what my dad drinks, and I wanted to, just buy something for the heck of it. So now he'll owe me some money, or I guess he gave me some money.
Yeah.
But.
See, like on my 21st birthday, I guess the day of my birthday was relatively low key. My 21st birthday was also on a Wednesday, so we're like twins, I guess.
We are twins.
But mine was pretty low key too. We just went out to the Lamplighter and got some drinks. But then on Friday, me and Donovan, who was our guest a couple of weeks ago, and Leaf and a couple of our other friends went out to a couple different places, and I got very drunk that night. But I'm a drinker. I don't want to say that with any negative context necessarily, but I like to drink. I like alcohol.
Yeah, I've never seen it affect your personality in a real negative way.
Yeah. I tend to get rather hyper when I drink whiskey, which is most of the time. I like whiskey, but beer tends to mellow me out a little bit more, and I do like me some beer. I've got a nice Shiner Bock here with me.
Yeah.
Should this become, now that we're both of age, should this become an alcohol review podcast?
The bronze beer glass. I don't know what
bronze
we call
beer
it.
glass, bronze tankard.
There we go. That's what we could call
Bronze
it.
tankard.
No, and so I did have a drink. I didn't think I would on my 21st, but I did, and that was my first ever drink ever. Like,
oh wow, you were a good boy.
Yeah, I didn't drink in high school. Part of me did it because I knew that like I shouldn't because it was illegal.
Yeah.
But I think a large part of it too was I was a wimp in high school. Like I did a lot of stupid stuff, but I was like I didn't speed unless I was on like back roads and I knew there were no cops. But like I didn't drink because I was just afraid I was going to get caught and then like I'd get suspension from like sports and stuff like that.
There's nothing wrong with that. I would say it's not necessarily the norm, especially in the state that we have grown up in
a small town.
Still live in a small town in North Dakota. That's not the norm, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
With not drinking. It's Mom, if you're listening. No, she absolutely knows that I drank before I was 21. Like it's just kind of the norm.
Yeah, and then
parts.
There's a time and place for it. Like I think I know a lot of people, like a lot of my buddies had beers with their dads when they were in high school, and it wasn't a big deal. They didn't go anywhere. They weren't out partying. They just drank with their dads at the lake or whatever.
And that's the thing. Like I never really went out and partied other than like a couple of times, like for graduation and that sort of thing. I went out and partied, but other than that, I just didn't get invited to shit. It wasn't so much that I was like, oh, no, I don't want to go and party. It was like, no one invited me to the party.
I can't go out and party.
Because people, I think, kind of assumed that I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
Like, I was terrible at answering texts when I was in high school. I'm still pretty bad about it, but like, people just wouldn't text me to let me know that there was something going on because they assumed, first of all, that I wouldn't respond, and second of all, that I wouldn't want to come.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was kind of a feedback loop there.
I had a buddy who, most of my friends didn't drink other than like with their parents, but I had a friend who was like, I'm going to go out to a party this weekend. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I didn't think he would. And he ended up going out to a party out in the middle of nowhere, and he's pretty drunk, and the cops showed up.
Uh-oh.
So like, of course, like perfect situation for your first time drinking.
Yeah. Perfect storm of bullshit.
Yeah. And so everybody kind of scatters like you do when the cops, like the floodlights come up and everybody scatters. So he just starts running, and he'd never been to this person's house before. So he's just like, they're out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. He's out just sprinting as fast as he can. And there's a butte, like they're on the side of a butte, and there's about a 10-foot drop. So he's looking behind him going as fast as he can. And he was an athletic dude. He goes off of this butte and just rolls his ankle. And we found out the next day, or the next like Monday, that he had broken his ankle, and he had to tell his parents that it was in a pickup game of basketball. So instead of saying, like, and his jeans were all ripped up too, so he just threw them away. Like he just like got rid of all the evidence, and he was like, "Yeah, we were playing pickup game of basketball, and I, rolled my ankle," and so he ended up being on crutches for a little bit. I don't think he ever had a boot, but he was on crutches for a while.
Oh no. Yeah, that's no good, especially for like a first big drinking experience. That's no fun. Yeah, I've never really done anything particularly dumb. Never had any run-ins with the cops while drinking. Even when I was underage, it was never an issue. I do have some stories, but they're not ones that I would necessarily tell on this podcast. But they're also too long. Speaking of things that have gone too long, we should get to the album. So we listened to an album called, I forgot the name again, Sunbather. I don't know why the name of this album refuses to stick in my head. So we listened to Sunbather by Deafheaven. They're an American band formed in 2010 by vocalist George Clark and guitarist Kerry McCoy. Deafheaven generally is known for their very interesting blend and unique blend of black metal, post-rock, and shoegaze. And Deafheaven have kind of been at the forefront of sort of this nascent genre that people have been calling black gaze, a little bit of ambient black metal, or some people have said atmospheric black metal, but in a sense, all black metal is atmospheric, so that term is kind of confusing. But at the very least, they've been around since 2010. They have 3 full album releases. This is number 2. The first one was Roads to Judah, but Sunbather is really what brought them to popularity. This is what got them known. It garnered an insane amount of critical acclaim, and it was from a lot of publications that normally don't talk about metal or aggressive forms of music. They ended up on a lot of year-end lists, whether they were in the number one spot or just simply on the year-end list. It was crazy the amount of attention that this album got. So some notable review scores that they got from Metacritic, they hold a 92 out of 100. Metacritic is sort of a conglomerate of various different review places. From Absolute Punk, they have a 100%. AllMusic gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. The AV Club gave it an A. Some other notable ones: Decibel Magazine gave it a 9 out of 10 alongside Exclaim. Pitchfork Media, which is mostly known for reviewing, I guess, kind of indie rock and hipster type music and like sort of hipstery pop and that sort of thing, they gave it a review of 8.9 out of 10. Rolling Stone gave it a 3 out of 5, which is kind of even surprising that Rolling Stone gave it a review at all. Mm-hmm. They ended up similarly on a lot of year-end lists for those very same publications, as well as some other ones that I hadn't mentioned yet, including NPR and Pop Matters, interestingly, who listed Dream House as being one of the 75 best songs of 2013, ranking it at number 25, which is surprising from a publication called Pop Matters that are reviewing this ambient metal track as one of their favorite songs. So they got a lot of attention really quickly after Sunbather came out, and this caused a little bit of backlash in the metal community, particularly, specifically with members of the black metal community, who kind of soured on the band over what they saw as essentially musical gentrification. They thought that Deafheaven being so popular and the term black metal being associated with them so frequently in all of these different publications that were talking about them, that it would bring in a whole bunch of like hipsters and whatnot into the black metal community, which is, generally speaking, one of the most intentionally uninviting communities within the entire sphere of metal.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but black metal, I think, generally follows that trend of being very uninviting and intimidating, and that extends not just to the music, but the community as well. So in response to that, the band has issued multiple statements in reviews and whatnot that they don't consider themselves a black metal band. I don't know what they do consider themselves, if anything. A lot of bands tend not to subscribe to any sort of label, especially when they're involved with doing as many fusions of different genres as Deafheaven is. So, about the album itself. Sunbather was released on Deathwish Inc., which is the record label that is owned and founded by Converge's vocalist, Jacob Bannon. It was recorded impressively in the space of just 5 days at Atomic Garden Studios in East Palo Alto, California. The album was recorded entirely via analog consoles on 2-inch tape. The tracks were then converted to digital, and the final production was done digitally on Pro Tools, just because that's easier. And then the mixing and mastering were also done analog. All of the production work was done by Jack Shirley, who's the owner of Atomic Garden Studios. There's a lot of themes on this album. There's no single unifying theme or story or anything like that to the songs, but generally speaking, they all have a sense of melancholy to the songs. So that's something that I'm sure you picked up on. The opening track, Dream House, centers on the theme of death. The lyrics that I have written down here are, from the final part of the song, I am dying. Is it blissful? It's like a dream. I want to dream. And I want to dream is repeated over and over again. So there's a lot of other themes. One of the other big ones is the idea of income disparity or income inequality. That was brought about by vocalist George Clark driving through this very affluent suburb and sort of dwelling on these feelings of longing for wealth, but also feeling a sense of anger and bitterness towards it because you don't have it, sort of longing for a better life. Vertigo is about very similar feelings as well as a tinge of regret in a lot of that. You can't have that better life because of mistakes that you've made, rather than just wanting it and not being able to get it. You can't get it because of mistakes that you've made. The final major song is The Pecan Tree, which instead of being about wealth focuses on George Clark's feelings towards his father, who apparently was not a great guy, or at the very least, he didn't have a good relationship with him. But the song ends with a very bitter admission that he's no different from his father, and that, the lyrics specifically say, "I am my father's son. I am no one. I cannot love. It's in my blood," which is like,
man.
that's heavy.
That is heavy.
And the album also features a number of ambient interludes that sort of fill the space between each main track. These were the result of guitarist Kerry McCoy having more material than they needed. He had all of these riffs that he had written that didn't really fit with any of the songs, so they decided to do something with them, and they recorded all of these ambient interludes to fill the space between each song. They don't use ambient interludes or anything like that on either of their other albums, which is sort of interesting because this is their most well-known, and you would think, oh, maybe they would do that on some of their other stuff, but they haven't. They didn't use it on the album that would come after this, which is called the New Bermuda, which is, interestingly, like, I listened to Sunbather a couple times this week, but I found myself being drawn more and more to New Bermuda for some reason, more so than Sunbather, which might be because I've listened to Sunbather a ton since I found out about Deafheaven a couple of years ago, whereas I haven't given quite the same attention to New Bermuda, and I really, really like both of these albums. I haven't listened to Roads to Judah very much. Speaking of liking things, what did you think of this?
I liked it. I was listening to it, and I this is probably the wrong term, but it sounded kind of like that alternative rock. And that's, like I said, that's not quite how I want to phrase it. But it was like, it wasn't your stereotypical, like...
It wasn't your run-of-the-mill metal.
Yeah. So it was like, the vocals were still, there were some growls.
I wouldn't call them growls.
Yeah.
I'd call them either just screams, or I would almost even say shrieks.
Okay.
The vocals are definitely, on this album in particular, the most black metal part. That is where their black metal influence comes in the most. That sort of, not high pitched necessarily, but it's definitely not low. Yeah. That sort of shrill shriek that you hear George Clark do. But that shriek that you hear George Clark do is a mainstay of black metal. Pretty much all black metal vocals have something to that effect, and other than bits of the guitar work on this record, that is the most clear black metal influence. Roads to Judah has more of it, just from snippets that I was listening to sort of have it fresh in my mind. Roads to Judah has a lot more black metal influence musically, but this album and all of their work generally, because George Clark basically does the same vocal, carries that same sentiment. Pretty much all their songs sort of have a sense of melancholy, which is, again, not something that you really hear on a ton of, like, at least the types of metal that we've listened to so far. I think in avant-garde types of metal, that is definitely a feeling that is carried more so, like Slice the Cake, for example. That had some pretty melancholy stuff on it. Generally, it was a bit more intense, but you don't tend to see that sort of stuff on regular metal. And I think the term that I would use to describe it, I wouldn't say, so you said alternative rock, I would say post rock.
Okay, yeah, so that's when I was listening to it, I was like, I want to say alternative, but I know that that's not.
So post rock, for people who aren't really aware of what it is, I can loosely define it. It's not really a genre that lends itself well to being defined as a singular thing, but if I had to give it a definition, post-rock is any sort of band that has the traditional rock band setup of you've got a drummer, you've got a couple of guitarists, a bassist, and a keyboardist. Most of the time, post-rock does not feature vocals, but so you've got that setup of all these different instruments that you would normally find in a rock band, but you do not play rock songs necessarily. You play these, sort of long, very interesting, creative tracks. I've showed you Caspian recently, and I was listening to it on my way to work today. I was listening to some Caspian, and I could definitely see where people say, oh, Deafheaven has some post-rock elements to it. That's not something that I've always been able to identify, but now with Deafheaven so fresh in my mind, and then listening to a post-rock band, that made a lot more sense to me. A lot of post-rock bands tend to have this very interesting feeling of tenderness to them. There are definitely some more foreboding post-rock bands, or some just very out there post-rock bands. Like Godspeed You Black Emperor is weird. Like that band is strange. It's slow and it builds, and I think that sort of influence shines through on a lot of Deafheaven's work. A question that I want to pose to you, to hopefully hand it off to you for a little bit if you've got anything good for this, is do you think that this album is more accessible? Like some of the backlash was that this album was too accessible, almost to the level of a pop song. And that's why people got so afraid that hipsters were going to be coming into the black metal community. Do you think that this album is that accessible, that it would appeal to the general audience?
I don't know that it would appeal to the general audience, like if you heard it on the radio, that you'd like it, or that it would be something that they'd play on the radio. But I definitely think it was something for me that, like, sometimes I'll have my girlfriend, like, I'll play music in the background and I'll have her be like, listen to what we listened to last week. And this is definitely something that I think would be like a good stepping stone for her to like really get into it. Cause it is accessible to, because it is kind of that like post rock you were saying. It's not like, it's got a feel to it that's, I'm going to bounce off your word of tender, versus like really like aggressive and or really emotional, like Slice the Cake was. Like, if you're not ready for what's to come, that's going to take you off guard. And I think this album was pretty accessible, and even down to like the cover art. When I looked it up and it's like the pink or salmon or whatever color, I was like, is this the right one?
Is this a metal album? I would agree with a lot of those sentiments. I think it is definitely a very good stepping stone into more serious forms of metal, I guess. Serious might not be the correct word, but I know once I started listening to Deafheaven, I started to develop more of an interest in black metal. That never really came into fruition. Black metal is still one of the few genres of metal that I have yet to really step into, alongside like thrash metal, which I'm sorry to say it, I guess, but I just don't have an interest in thrash metal. I don't think it's particularly relevant anymore. I might catch some flack for that. I don't know. But like generally speaking, I think especially the big thrash metal bands, like you've got your Metallicas and Iron Maidens and whatnot, like I don't think they're really relevant to what metal is today anymore. And there are probably some great thrash metal bands out there, but I just don't think there's much new under the sun in that area. But things like Deafheaven are what's new under the sun. And for me, it kind of worked the opposite, to where to a person in the general audience, this might be an inroad to different kinds of metal, whether it's black metal or just metal with screamed vocals in general. Yeah. This sort of worked for me as an inroad to post-rock. It wasn't consciously necessarily. I began to notice there's a website that I found where you can type in the name of a band and it will show you like a data map of bands that are similar to it. And once I started getting into post-rock and noticing, something that was familiar unconsciously, and I would enter in like, I want to find bands similar to This Will Destroy You, Deafheaven would pop up like pretty close in that cluster. Yeah. So there's a lot of overlap in the fan base, and that sort of made me realize like, oh yeah, Deafheaven does have a lot of that stuff going on. And post rock has become a a huge part of my listening habits. It's really good ambient music.
Yeah.
It's not just ambient music, which some people think it is. There's a lot of really interesting complexities going on in a ton of these different bands, but it is good background music. It is fantastic for that, is because it is so ambient. When I don't feel like paying super close attention to this really intricate metal album that I want to listen to, it's good for that.
I definitely see how this album, though, like, you would be afraid that hipsters would come.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, this is accessible enough that I think that it would reach a certain audience. And, like, people who are self-proclaimed hipsters, I think this almost would be something for them to, like, chomp at the bit, because they could be, oh, I'm a blah 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 black metalist, and
like I've listened to this black metal album. You guys haven't listened to it. You guys are still listening to folk. Like
and then they'd have they'd make their own songs, and they'd have really stupid lyrics that were just about whatever. So I definitely get like the fear of making something too accessible.
Well, and I understand that too, because if you think back to when I was talking about like the production of the album, all of that sounds super hipster.
Yeah.
Like they recorded it in 5 days. They recorded it analog.
Yeah.
Like all of that stuff sounds super hipster. There's a ton of metal bands that still like to record analog. I know Kurt Ballou of Converge, in his studio, they still have an analog mixer and that sort of thing, because a lot of the bands that he records for want that done, because that's that is part of the grindcore sound, and that is part of, he does a lot of grindcore and hardcore bands and that sort of thing, and that they don't want the super polished digital sound to it, and I think that's why Deafheaven did that. They didn't want it to sound absolutely clean. This album is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's not, this super lo-fi black metal album that was recorded in Lars's basement on the same board that we're recording on. Like it wasn't, it's not that, and that's why it's not black metal, because it does sound beautiful, and it is high fidelity, and there is a lot to appreciate here beyond the mystique of it being this really deep thing. Like, that might be the mystique for some hipsters, I guess, who want to listen to it. I don't want to attach too much negative stigma to being a hipster. Like I think I'm probably a hipster. Like, I mean, I got my glasses and my Silent Planet shirt and all that stuff. Like, Silent Planet's kind of a hipster band, but they're genuinely good, and Deafheaven is in the exact same boat where they don't try to be hipster, they just sort of appeal to.
I think like being a hipster turns bad when you're a self-proclaimed, or like that's what you're going for.
You're trying to be hipster. That is that, and that's any community.
Yeah.
If you are trying to be a hipster, or trying to be a metalhead, or trying to be a punk, you're not getting it.
Yeah, like you're not in it for the right reasons. That's what I think. Like, because I grew up on comic books, and so then all of a sudden the movies come out. We've said this before. Everybody's an expert once there's a movie.
Yeah.
So it's like really hard, because everybody else is like forcibly, because this is the cool thing now. They're forcibly trying to like something that I just like grew into.
You always have liked.
Yeah.
And I grew into metal as well, but I think for me there is a sense of like I'm always trying to seek out new ways to appreciate metal, and I think recently I've kind of hit a brick wall, can kind of branch out into the genre, further into the genres that I'm already into, because like I'm struggling to find new kinds of metal that I want to like, because I've sampled pretty much all of them and sort of stuck to what I enjoy.
Yeah.
Because like I have tried black metal, and the vast majority of it isn't really for me. I don't know if there's another type of metal that springs to mind that I don't really enjoy all that much. I mean, I haven't tried very hard to listen to thrash metal that is not one of the big four.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I don't think that Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer rest in peace, Slayer, because they recently announced that they're breaking up, or at the very least they're quitting. But I don't think that they're that relevant. They definitely inspired a lot of the bands that I do find relevant. I went off on a tangent. I don't remember where we were. Where we are, I suppose, is at about time. If you've got any final comments about the album.
This isn't about the album, but I heard this today. I learned this, and I thought it was very metal.
Okay.
So this guy, I don't remember the time period. It must have been. It was Greek or Roman or whatever. But he wanted to find a way to kill people for treason, the worst of the worst. So he wanted to find kind of a torturous way.
I like this already.
So he made, I think they called it the Bronze Bull.
Oh, the bronze or the brass bull. Okay, I know what this is. I know. Keep going.
So I'll explain. What it is it's this brass. It looks like a bull, and what you do is you put somebody in it through the back, and then you seal them in there, and you light a fire under it, and there's no water, but it boils them to death. And the way that it's set up is the screams, the horrific screams of the victims echo out of the mouth of the bull. So it sounds like the bull is screaming, it sounds like a bull screaming, not somebody screaming for pain. So the guy that made it presented it to the emperor. He's like, look at this thing. We can kill our worst enemies in it. And the emperor's like, that's messed up.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, he's like, that's so messed up. Show us how it works. And so the guy's like, you just get in here and you climb up in here, and the emperor slams the gate closed, and then they burn the dude to death. So he was the first person ever killed.
That is
by his invention.
That is very metal. Do you remember which? Because I've heard this story before, and I think I've read about it. But do you remember which emperor it was?
I don't remember.
Okay, because that sounds like a very Caligula thing to do, I guess. But,
I was listening to where I heard it was I was listening to a podcast talking about Thomas Edison's and then he tried to bash AC electricity.
Yeah.
He bashed it and said it could be used to kill people.
Yeah.
So they were talking about the electric chair, and then they were like, oh, yeah, and then there's this thing, and they went off and talked about that.
Yeah.
But, look it up if you're interested. It's funny but ironic story.
Yeah, I have heard about that. It is indeed very metal. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That's going to do it for us today. Before we go, I'd like to remind you folks to check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'll be posting a photo that I forgot I had of Jaryn.
Oh no, I don't know what photo this is.
I'll show it to you after we're done here. But it's a photo I forgot I had of Jaryn, and I'll be putting it on Instagram if you want to check that out. But yeah, follow us on those social media platforms. Give us some likes. Share us with your friends. Tell people what it's all about. Jaryn, do you want to handle where can people listen to us?
You can listen to us on Libsyn or iTunes or Facebook. There's a link that will take you to Libsyn, I believe. But just look us up on the social media and you'll find us, and write a review on iTunes and share us on Facebook, like us on Facebook to keep up with our posts. And
you can also find us on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. And Kayle has the best YouTube show out there. I don't know if it's the best. Metal show. It's the metal show produced by us.
The last two episodes haven't even been about metal albums. But
Details. But check us out. We're on YouTube, iTunes, Libsyn. You can find us there. Fan Talk is on our YouTube.
Yep. It's Fan Talk. This week I talked about the new single from the Wonder Years. They're my favorite band, which is odd because I have such diverse tastes in metal, and then there's the Wonder Years, which is a pop punk or emo band. So they are by default my favorite band, and so they put out a new single for their forthcoming album. I was really stoked to hear it. I'm not quite sure how I felt about it, but I'd like you guys to watch the episode if you're interested in that sort of thing. Check out other Fan Talk episodes too. Helps me out. Yeah, that's about all the social media stuff out of the way. So thank you all very much for listening. This has been Bronze Metalist. My name is Kayle.
My name is Jaryn.
And we have nothing left to say.